Hey guys. All right, we are back at it, examining now the fourth commandment, the first of the remaining seven commandments. The first three are focused on how to love God, the rest, how do we love neighbor. So, the fourth commandment stems from the obligation of children to honor and obey their parents, and it stems from being a just response. So, it's based on justice. A just response to the blessing their parents gave them, life, right? Parents, in turn, owe children fairness, discipline, and instruction in the faith, religious instruction. Um, Spousal unity is essential for the family and society. Obedience is owed to everyone in authority with certain conditions. Citizens and lawful authority have reciprocal duties toward one another, i.e., citizens owe certain things to authorities, authorities owe certain things to citizens. So that's the chapter. Now, of course, I'm going to go into a bit more detail, but that is what the fourth commandment is really about at its core. It starts out on the micro level of the family and expands out into the macro level of society at large. Um, so it begins with the respect owed to parents, and then respect that stems from that extends to authority. I talked a little bit about this with you guys before when I talked about how in the classroom I am the authority figure, and the authority that I get stems from that which your parents give me in lieu of them in those situations. So my authority comes from them, directly or indirectly. Okay? Um, so this is a very short chapter. It's only I think less than 10 pages long. We're going to do the bulk of it tonight in terms of me giving you the material, going over it in our Zoom class tomorrow. And then I'll give you some important stuff as far as the more macro level of this and application of this in the next video. Okay, so quick summation of the um, four little mini sections that we're going to be going over today. First is the family as a community of love. First and foremost, it needs to be stated that in our understanding of who we are and who we were created to be, the ideal setting for the raising, the upbringing of children is within the family unit, right? This stems from natural law, and stemming from it, the closer the relationship, the greater the duty to love. So, a husband and wife have to show their greatest love for each other, right? So, husband has to love wife first and foremost. And from that love, as we know in terms of mirroring, imaging, not mirroring, but imaging the Trinity, right? And from that hierarchy of love, we get the healthy family environment in which children can be raised properly, right? Which leads us into the next kind of subduty, that's not right, section, which is parental duties. What responsibilities do parents have? We go to the Old Testament, right? I'm probably a little bit too close to the mic, so I'm popping a little bit. The Old Testament promises blessings on children who honor their parents, right? If we look at this commandment as written, it is a positive commandment, right? Honor your mother and father, right? That's the part that we listen to. That's the part that we're obliged to do. But this commandment, if you look on page number 167 in your textbook, it shows you in two different kind of areas where the Ten Commandments are given. Now, when I say they're given, it's just different kind of ways of looking at the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments were given, if you will, in Exodus, but we see it kind of recounted in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. So it's kind of a side note here. But in both cases of Exodus and Deuteronomy, that positive commandment of honor your father and your mother, right, has a blessing that's attached to it. In the case of Exodus, and this is on page 167 in your textbooks, honor your father and your mother that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God gives you. In Deuteronomy, honor your father and mother as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be prolonged and that it may go well with you in the land which the Lord your God gives you. Okay? So, if you do this, right, what it's saying, this is the good end, this is the good result that will come from it. So, the Old Testament promises blessings on children who honor their parents. And the reality is, no matter how grateful we as children are, we can never repay our parents, even the worst parents, right, who are terrible in terms of raising us and all that other stuff, by sheer virtue of the fact that they gave us the gift of life, albeit through God, right? It's a debt that can never be repaid, right? So there's always going to be an unjust aspect to it there, which is why we are owing them respect, and they being the people through whom God acted to create you. Obviously, it kind of goes beyond to him as well. So the reality is each child is a child of God, redeemed by Christ, and must be treated by the parents as such. So hopefully your parents recognize what a gift you are and treat you as such, right? But there is a respect that is supposed to be going in both directions. Respect from children to their parents, but also respect from parents to their children by virtue of who we are as human beings. And that's kind of, when we look at this commandment, it's kind of why we start with this one, why it's what we call has what's known as pride of place. It's the first one, right? First one of the remaining 7, because it speaks to respect for life, right? All the other ones we're going to talk about, loving neighbor, is rooted in respect for life. And so what we're going to be talking about today and tomorrow and as we move forward is respect for life in kind of different ways, shapes, and forms. Okay? So going back to the point, each child is a child of God, redeemed by Christ, and must be treated by their parents as such. Formation, right? In good use. Formation, right? That's one of the main jobs of your parents, right? Their job is to help you be the best version of yourself, right? They're supposed to be fair, discipline, and instruct you, right? They're your first teachers. Remember, it was Pope St. John Paul II who referred to the family as the domestic church, right? So formation, right? What does formation entail? What is the instruction it's supposed to give you? First and foremost, good use of your freedom, right? How should you act? Self-control, a sense of responsibility. All those things, hopefully your parents have and continue to teach you, not just through words, which are helpful, but through their own actions. Because I think we all know that seeing stuff in action is often easier than listening to it. Even though I'm doing the talking stuff here, hopefully you guys see, or at least saw, that when we were together, that I lived what I was saying. Like, I treated you with respect, and hopefully you were able to see that I was putting into action the words that I was speaking. Okay. So parents are the primary educators of their children, and they can't pass that obligation to educate them in faith to schools and parishes, right? Ultimately, I can instruct you as much as I can, but it is their job to have laid the groundwork, the foundation, and me to continue it, not to give you all of it. And so there is a direct connection between the religious practice of the parents and that of their children. And we talked about this when we talked about baptism and confirmation. Those who had parents and godparents who practiced their faith often had a much easier time understanding, much easier time practicing the faith that they were given and instructed in. Okay. The next section after parental duties is, sorry, let me make sure I have the right one. Yeah, filial duties. And filial simply means what do we as children owe our parents? Filial piety. That means love of parents, right? So when we look at filial duty, it's kind of the converse of what Parents owe us instruction, right? We as children owe our parents obedience, right? We're called to obey them. Now, there are situations in which that kind of moves aside. So there's always another kind of aspect to this, right? We owe our parents obedience, whether or not they're good or bad role models, within reason, right? What we do always owe our parents, whether they're good or bad, and whether their requests are reasonable or not, is love and respect, right? That is non-conditional. That is always there, right? And that is hard, right? That's a hard reality, supernatural reality that we're called to face. But here's the thing, guys. We're called to love everyone we meet, right? One of the answers I noticed in your quiz the other day is that, I forget how I phrased it exactly, but your answers were, the correct answer was everyone, right? I think it was respecting people's names. And a lot of you wrote the holy people, and I responded to you, well, we're called to respect the unholy ones as well. That means love too, right? Respect and love. So when it comes to this, as children, we owe them obedience, and there are some provisions, like your parent can't ask you to do something that is immoral. They can't ask you to do something that is wrong, right? But we have an obligation to honor our parents with charity and support without condoning wrongdoing, right? And we always owe them love. And that idea of respect and love extends obviously beyond just what we owe our parents. There is elements that go into the extended family as well, right? So when we talk about filial duties, it stems from filial piety, and that is respect/love for our parents. Now, it's mostly respect. That's really what piety stands for. But it really is important that we have parents as good examples, right? And even when that's not the case, even when they're not good examples, not good parents, we still owe them love and respect. Not always obedience, but usually that's what we're looking for, as long as it is not an immoral request. Even if it might seem unreasonable, we should do our best to obey it, right? And that is sometimes a tough pill to swallow. Now, at 42, do I always do what my mom at 70-something asks me to do? I try, right? As long as it's reasonable, as long as it makes sense. But I am an adult. I have a maturation that has come with me through, 42 years of living, where I am able to make some decisions. But I still, even at 42, have an obligation to obey, right? And respect my mom, right? And that is always going to be the case. It's helpful now to kind of detour for a second and take a look at where this kind of historically is grounded. Now, this commandment, when it emerged in like 4,000, 5,000 BC or so, we have to understand the Middle East and the kind of life that was lived there. For many, there was kind of two options: people that settled down in farms and small agricultural communities, and occasionally cities and stuff. But by and large, a lot of people lived nomadic lives. I'm going to put my hand down because it's distracting me as I'm watching it move all across the screen. And being nomadic people, well, they had to move from place to place, and they had to move pretty quickly. And when we look at this commandment to honor your mother and your father, or honor your father and mother, depending on what interpretation you're looking at, it really kind of is rooted in a call not to euthanize your parents, euthanasia, right? And you're like, wait a second, that's fifth commandment stuff. And you're right, but to show love and respect to your parents by not leaving them in the middle of the desert, because that was kind of where this commandment was rooted in, right? The tendency for some of the nomadic tribes to leave the sick, the injured, the dying behind so that they could move on. So that is partly kind of the historical origin of this commandment as well. Something to think about. The last thing that we're going to talk about today before we get into the questions is spousal unity. I think we sometimes underestimate when we talk about the relationship between parents and children in the family unit how important spousal unity is, right? Now, some of you have become experts at pitting mom against dad, or mom against stepdad, stepdad against mom, whatever. When we look at marital fidelity, right, spousal unity, that's what we're talking about. It's really important, right? It cultivates and facilitates in children a respect and obedience toward the one who made marital fidelity in the first place, who created it, and that is God, right? It also directs us and the children who witness it towards respect and obedience towards parents and other authority. When we look at this, I don't want to call it a commandment, right? But kind of related to the fourth commandment. It's kind of subset, if you will. And I don't want to harp on this too long because we're going to talk about it more when we get to the sixth and eighth commandments sixth and ninth commandments. But a healthy spousal relationship encourages respect and devotion from the children, right? When they see mom and dad loving each other, when they see an ordered love relationship, mom and dad love each other, and from that love, a beautiful love for their children, an ordered love for their children, they are able to better understand how to love and therefore obey and honor their parents, and by extension, all the other people that they encounter. Okay. So that's a lot of information that I just gave to you all in one sitting, and thank you for sitting through it. Well, let's go over your questions from your Unit 7 questions. What is the best place to raise children well? Well, we know the answer to that. The ideal setting is in the family. Okay, we talked about that one earlier. The second question, who are husband and wife most obligated to love? Again, I gave you the answer to this one. Their primary, greatest, most intense love should be for each other, right? It is that hierarchical, horizontal love, and then the vertical love, which is secondary, is between parents and children, right? Now, I think we get caught up in the language of primary and secondary, but the beauty of this is when it's ordered, when it's kind of a good love the way it's supposed to be, it doesn't seem secondary, right? Their love is self-perpetuating and generating, and because they love each other properly, they're able to properly love their children, and there wouldn't be any kind of notice on anyone's part that there is kind of a secondary love that exists. It seems primary because that primary love that actually does exist appears similar, if that makes sense. Okay. Third question, what is the child's obligation to his or her parents? As a child, you are called to honor, obey, respect, and love your parents, right? Because, and here's the reason, kind of even for not good parents, why this is the case, they're representatives of God, right? They are the physical source of your life, and God, of course, is the physical ultimate end, right? Teleological end, and spiritual source of you, right? So they exist because of him, you exist because of them, right? So that's where it kind of, again, hierarchical. The fourth question, what is the relationship between the family and good citizenship? A healthy family is going to be the environment which directs children to the education and to instruction that sets them up for success in terms of being contributing citizens to a just society. If the family is ordered toward the good, they're going to be doing their job, which is the education of good citizens, right? Which is the primary responsibility in terms of education that parents fulfill. Parental duties. So question 1 under that section. What does the fourth commandment promise children who honor their parents? Short answer is blessings. You can look in Exodus and Deuteronomy for more specific, but it's blessings that will extend throughout their lives in the land that God gives them. The second question, why are children forever in their parents' debts, right? And that is a reality I think sometimes is difficult for us to face. We are going to perpetually owe our parents for the gift of life that we have, right? Because no matter how grateful we are, we can never repay that debt, right, for life and upbringing, right? The first one is sacrosanct. That can't change. Like, they gave you the gift of life. The second, upbringing, that is where we kind of run into some issues with some people who have not so good upbringings. But even then, I mean, even in the worst of the worst, there is still some brightness. There's still some good in those situations. The first and primary one, the gift of life that they gave you in and of itself. Okay. The third question, how should one's children be treated? That is, how should a parent treat their children? Each of us, every single human person, is a child of God, right? All of us have been redeemed by Christ on the cross. And as children of God, we should be treated as such. And so your parents should treat you with respect as well. Okay. Last set of questions. First, why are children to obey their parents? Well, we are obligated to obey our parents regardless of whether our parents are good role models, because they are what is the, I mean, it's part of the fourth commandment, but it really stems from who they are in relation to, like, they are the I don't want to say figureheads, but they are the next closest to us, I guess, if you talk in terms of proximity. I said we're hierarchical and proximal beings. In terms of proximity, they are the ones that we are closest to. That is going to shift once you entered into married life, in which case then you're still obligated to obey your parents to the best of your ability, but now it becomes you are a parent, or you are at least a husband or a wife, and that's kind of where we see a shift in terms of obedience. It becomes that primary relationship takes precedence. Okay. Second, what is the importance of the good example of parents? Parents serve as role models, right? They serve as teachers, and they effectively direct and guide their children, i.e. us, through not just verbal commands, but through actions. Good example. So I think it is kind of most succinctly put when actions speak louder than words. If you have a parent that tells you to do X, Y, and Z, and they don't, it's going to be more difficult for you to do those things, right? I think we often have a big problem with hypocrisy and fail to recognize in ourselves. That's a different issue. But the problem we have with hypocrisy is we don't want to see people tell us to do X, Y, and Z and not do it, right? So that's why a good example is a good example for us, because if they're doing it, then we can do it. We don't feel bad doing it. We don't see it being unnecessary because other people are actually doing it, so we should do it too. Third, what is the demand of charity toward members of the extended family? The fourth commandment requires us to honor our family members who are closest in blood, and so people that are close to us in blood are our parents, our siblings, but it extends to aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, etc. We have a duty to love the members of our extended family, is the long and the short of the answer to this question, right? And I understand it's difficult because of distance, because of busy schedules, etc. But we're called to love, right? We're creatures who are created by our Creator to love, and that love is easiest, if you will. It's not ever really easy in the world of brokenness that we live in, but it is easiest to convey to those that are closest to us. Again, proximal beings. Fourth, How does marital fidelity affect children's respect for authority? It cultivates and facilitates in children respect and obedience toward God, the parents, and all authority. And when you see your parents honoring, loving, and respecting each other, modeling for you, becomes easier for you to do. And I think we sometimes lose sight of the simpleness of that reality. Good example is good example, right? The good part is not just because it is good, right, or of God, but also because it's good in terms of being an exemplar, right? Being a good example. So there you go. All right, tomorrow is going to be much shorter. Apologize for the length of this one. But there's a lot of good content in it. We're going to talk about how St. Paul takes the ideas of the fourth commandment. And he wasn't the first to do it, but he just expounded upon it and put it into the Christian prism and perspective for us. Our obligations as citizens and to authority, right? As Christians, that respect and love that we should have for always for our parents extends from them, right? Because it is in turn extended from God to them. All right. More on that tomorrow. Love you guys. See you in class. And hopefully you have a good night. Bye.